So let's move the conversation over to environmental, social, and corporate governance, more commonly known as ESG, right? And there's been a great deal to navigate of late in these last 10 months or so, and into the immediate future. So socially responsible investing has been significantly more important than ever, with a sharpened focus this year for both businesses and for investors. So Heidi, just to start this element of the conversation off with you, what changes have you seen relative to entrepreneurs coming to Threshold, to you with ideas around socially consciously driven companies with products or services? What have you seen?
So at the fundamental level, two thoughts here. One thought is, we all as leaders of our venture firm are looking to ensure that our companies are, free of sexual harassment and are models of D&I, and look for the opportunity to be good citizens of the community wherever possible. That said, I will say this, and one time we invested in an entrepreneur, and I was talking to him one day and I said, do you even know where venture money comes from? And he said, yeah, it's rich people's play money. And I said, no, it's not. It actually, our money comes from endowments and institutions and retirement funds. And they were not invested in us with the idea that our goal was social good. They were invested in us with the idea that we were going to grow that money and return it to them in a 7 to 10 year time frame. That said, I think one of the most interesting things that happens is some of the greatest disruptions one can do in businesses also creates a social good, because you're eliminating perhaps endemic structural issues with the status quo. So for example, a company we invest in, I'm on the board of Memphis Meats, that is growing meat from animal cells. So eliminating the animal livestock slaughter, et cetera, process. That, it takes 32 calories of input to create a calorie of cow to eat. And at scale, companies like Memphis Meats ought to be able to do that with 3 calories of input. Well, those inputs are land use, water, the creation of greenhouse gases. There's a tremendous amount of world good that would come by solving this problem. But there's also a tremendous amount of profit that should come by solving this problem. Or a company like Planet, another company I'm on the board on, we image the whole earth every day. That has tremendous use in government, agriculture, but it also has use for deforestation, watching the impact of climate change, the coral reefs. I mean, there are many things one can do once you build that asset, some of which are for do good and some of which are, highly valuable in certain business enterprises. So I think that for us, while we still are true to our mission, and our mission is to make money for our investors, we are seeing the opportunity that some of these companies have a great advantage and can do both at the same time. And the final point I'll make about this is those companies tend to have tremendously motivated employees who are motivated by the mission. And so frankly, like at both Planet and Memphis, the employee attachment to the mission and their sense of belonging and their sense of purpose, which is particularly important to people of, my children's generation, they have incredibly passionate employees who work very hard for those companies because there is an alignment of the good of the mission. And that, that pays dividends as well.
So the moral of the story is you can make money for investors with groundbreaking and disruptive technologies and services and still contribute to the global good.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, yes. Whatever happened to that investor, or the entrepreneur rather, who thought that you were managing rich people's money?
Oh, it's a very long story. We'll leave it at that.
For the chat room. All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Heidi. Tarang, when you think about e.l.f. Beauty and its wonderful reputation for leading with socially driven purpose, for example, your commitment to 100% vegan and cruelty-free worldwide, has e.l.f. changed or accelerated any purpose-driven initiatives this year? And how have you, and if so, how have you seen customers respond?
Yeah, no, we absolutely have accelerated it. First of all, we put out a new kind of purpose pillar. So our purpose is we stand with every eye, lip, face, and paw, and talks to our 100% vegan and cruelty-free. And inherently, our purpose is about inclusivity and empowerment. And the reason why that's so important is it not only ties to our DNA as a company of making the best of beauty accessible, but it really ties to what's important to our consumers that we serve. We tend to have a very strong following among Gen Z and millennials. And you'll see, I mean, there's lots of literature that those generations in particular, care not only about the products they're buying, but the company that stands behind those products. So really making sure that we're standing up to those values that are important. So we took a very strong stand on anti-Black racism. We've done a number of different things on kind of getting out the vote, core causes that are important to our audience. The other thing we do is on our empowerment pillar. It's not only about kind of the diversity of the team. We're always proud of kind of, you know, our team is 75% women, 60% Gen Z or millennial, 40% diverse, but all the way up through the board level. We've ensured, you know, we're, I think out of 4,800 public companies, we're one of only 9, actually probably less than 9, that have 60% women and 40% diversity on their board. And so our consumers actually care, and we care, but more importantly, our consumers care of what we're standing up for. And that includes how we empower others. Influencers are a big driver in beauty. We've tended to shy away from some of the mega influencers that you pay a lot of money to sponsor. Instead, we do quite a bit of giving a leg up to rising influencers. People are first starting out to kind of help them build their brand through our program on Beautyscape. And we've seen is it's done great for what not only does the brand stand for, but also for the business. They've been able to kind of drive the business better than we otherwise would. So purpose, I'd say, has been important. I'd say it's even more important now. I think particularly through the pandemic, people really want to know that a company stands for more than just making profits or delivering good products. And so I think it's going to have even more importance going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. So Fred, let's hear from you. What kind of new challenges has TPG and, again, the private equity venture capital community at large seen in investing in ESG-directed funds? And if so, how are they adapting?
Yeah. So as you referenced in the introduction, I work across 2 of our platforms. The first is the Growth Equity Fund, and then the second is the Rise Fund, which is essentially companies at exactly the same stage, growth equity, middle market. But these companies have a distinct social or environmental purpose in addition to their commercial or financial purpose. And I couldn't agree with Heidi's comment more in terms of the passion and the enthusiasm and the just the commitment that these employees have. But as you think about the challenges of this, I'll point out a couple that I think are strategic and then a couple that are more operational relative to investing in this space. And again, this is a pool of capital that is dedicated only to companies that have this, call it, dual mission or purpose. The first strategic question is the decision of whether to operate at scale or not. One of the things we observed is that there's a $2.5 trillion annual deficit in the amount of capital that's put forward if we ever want to realize the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's because philanthropy and giving and impact investing operate at subscale. And the reality is that private sources of capital haven't come in at scale. And so we made a decision to come in at a fund that was $2.5 billion. We're now on our second raise, but this question of do you try to operate at scale or not, I think is an important one. The second is how you think about the return profile. And I think there's a false narrative out there that impact investing has to infer concessionary returns. And we just established, particularly since we share in some instances LPs across funds, that we were going to have exactly the same financial return profile for these companies that we have for any other middle market growth equity, and that we believe that financial performance and impact performance are collinear, that one contributes to the other in equal parts, and we've proven that out, at least to ourselves, in a fairly analytical way. From an operational standpoint, I think there's 2 things to think about. The first is, how do you actually measure impact? We all have a way of calculating IRR or multiples of money. We actually worked very extensively with Bridgespan, KPMG, and others to create a rigorous analytical methodology that quantifies the impact that we're underwriting. And that is established before any deal gets approved at investment committee. We report it to our LPs, and it's audited by KPMG every year. Now, the thing I say is that system is like any good cost accounting system. The only thing that's true is it's wrong. But you want one. And so what we've done is we've created a really evidentiary based way of being able to measure and hold ourselves accountable to what we think those returns are. And I think if you're going to be in this space, you have to be able to have that kind of quantifiable piece. And then the last part I would mention that I think you have to think about from an operational standpoint is it has real impact back into the firm, because who your ecosystem is, the composition and complexion of your own firm, and the kinds of activities that you engage in. So as an example, we committed to providing a funding mechanism for any of our employees who found themselves caught in some of the issues associated with the movement on the rulings on DACA. We've taken a very different posture on diversity within our own firm as well as on our boards. We've had to figure out how to tap into this community of experts and resources so that we can support the portfolio companies. And so if you're going to go into this space, you have to recognize that it's going to kind of fundamentally change how you have to operate as a firm. And I think that has a positive halo then into the general investing categories that we've historically been in.
Thank you, Fred. As we think a little bit about your comments on diversity in your boards, obviously this whole year is cast for a variety of reasons, a very big spotlight, an uncomfortable spotlight at times, on the pervasive issues of equality and diversity. And while a number of public companies have formal initiatives, diversity programs, inclusion programs, private companies are either taking the lead in an action-based leadership program or perhaps not yet taking the lead. So, Pat, as through your lens, what are you seeing?
So it's the hot issue now, Trina, for, the only way to describe it. And one of the things I worry about with hot issues is that they're hot until they're not, and then they kind of go away and people are on to the next hot issue. I do think that now in this moment we find ourselves in is a little bit different. I've been in private equity for almost 14 years now, and there's never been a time when private equity firms didn't say that diversity, wasn't important to them. There were conferences, there were panels, and there was always this kind of, hand wringing. It's like, if only we could find more talented women or minorities, then we would actually have the diversity that we want, that would be ideal. And we just can't find any, but we're trying. And I always said then, I said, the interesting thing about private equity is that I don't believe private equity says that the job is hard. And they don't say about anything else that, oh my God, if only valuations weren't so high, if only there wasn't so much competition, we get deals done, right? Again, they don't make excuses, if you will, for anything that's important. And I think, by and large, private equity was able to say this and not really make any real demonstrative movement, around the culture of private equity, around, just numbers, if you will, because you didn't have both things. You didn't have the carrot and you didn't have the stick. It wasn't clear that by winning you got anything from it. There was a real benefit to winning in the world of diversity or having a diverse culture. And it wasn't even clear that if you didn't do it right, that you would be penalized. I think that those things have changed now. I think that those things have changed for a lot of reasons. I mean, people have been, sitting in their homes now for 7 or 8 months. They've seen the things that happened this summer. And everybody now kind of asking themselves, what should I be doing? What can I do? And can I do more? And so just like in the public arena, private equity firms, and Fred started to hit on some of the things that TPG is doing, and we've seen them and a number of other private equity firms come out and make pretty big statements around what their intentions are around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it runs the full gamut. It's from, what do their companies look like? What do, their own firms look like? What do the portfolio companies look like from a management representation and from a board representation? And for the first time, putting real numbers alongside what they want these numbers to look like, what ideally the participation of diverse individuals to look like within those leadership teams. And so it feels to me that this is different, this moment, in terms of what groups are doing. And in fact, just yesterday, ILPA, which is the Institute of Limited Partners, came out with it's called the Diversity in Action Signatories. And what this has done is there are probably about 40 or 50 or so firms that have signed this, and they've signed on to hold themselves accountable for a few things: having a D&I policy that they publicize, tracking hiring and promotion by diversity, making sure that at all times they are not just making sure that they are communicating it, but they've got organizational goals that actually speak to exactly what they're trying to do from a recruitment and a retention standpoint. And then, as importantly, asking both, GPs and LPs to actually fill out these surveys and provide data on exactly, how far, their demographic data reflects the goals in which they've said. And so for the first time, you see not only, you see the PE firms signing on to this, but you also see this being measured, because as we all know, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. And if you start to actually have real attainable goals and goals that people have to achieve, you will actually see real movement.